A girl thought, lost to time and hardship, finds the boy she loved as a child, now a hardened cowboy. Reunited on the wild frontier, their shared past reignites old feelings, while the vast, untamed prairie witnesses a journey of healing, courage, and rekindled love. Sometimes, the heart remembers what the world tries to erase. Let's get started. The cowboy dismounted, his boots sinking slightly into the soft dust of the main street. The town was quiet, the usual chatter replaced by the distant call of a hawk circling above. He studied the young Apache woman before him, searching for the traces of the girl he once knew. Time had changed them both, though her presence carried a familiarity that tugged at something deep within him. Her eyes, dark and unwavering, seemed to pierce through the years, holding memories he had long buried. For a moment, he couldn't breathe, caught between disbelief and longing. She stepped closer, her hands folded in front of her, steady and confident despite the nerves he could see flickering in her gaze. "It's been so long," she said softly, and he felt the weight of every lost day press upon him. He tried to speak, but his throat felt dry and tight. Instead, he nodded, unable to find the right words. The wind stirred the loose strands of her hair, brushing her cheek, and he realized how much he had missed the subtle details of her presence, the way her eyes reflected the sky, the quiet strength in her stance. The town seemed to blur around them, the saloons and general store fading into insignificance. All that mattered was the sudden reconnection of a bond formed decades ago, fragile yet unbroken. Memories returned in flashes, the riverbank where they had shared stolen moments, the laughter that had echoed across the plains, the long summer days spent exploring hidden trails. He remembered her fearless curiosity, the way she had challenged him to climb trees or race across meadows. Each memory was a spark in the darkness of his mind, reigniting emotions he thought had been lost forever. "I never thought I'd see you again," he said finally, his voice rough from disuse, carrying the weight of years spent wondering and waiting. She smiled faintly, and it was enough to lift some of the heaviness from his chest. "Nor did I," she replied, her voice steady yet soft, carrying a mixture of relief and nostalgia. The wind shifted, rustling the dust and sending small clouds spiraling across the street. It felt like the world had paused for them, holding its breath as if acknowledging the significance of this reunion. He took a cautious step closer, unsure if his own audacity would frighten her. You're taller now," he said, attempting to mask the sudden awareness of how time had sculpted her presence. She laughed softly, a sound that was both familiar and new, carrying the musicality of youth and the richness of adulthood. "And you're still stubborn," she replied, teasing in the way only someone who had known him intimately as a child could. The humor broke some of the tension, and for the first time, he allowed himself to smile without fear. They began to walk together down the main street, each step measured, as though they were feeling their way back into trust. People in the town watched curiously but gave them space. Sensing that this was a reunion of significance, a moment not to be interrupted, he glanced at her from time to time, noting how she carried herself with a confidence born of survival, her eyes steady and perceptive. Every movement, every glance, reminded him that she was no longer the child he had once known. She was a woman forged by the trials of the frontier. The sun dipped lower, bathing the town in amber light. Shadows stretched across the dusty street, and the air smelled of smoke from nearby chimneys and the faint scent of wild sage. He realized how much had changed, not just in the town, but within himself. Meeting her again forced him to confront the life he had been living in solitude. The quiet days spent thinking of her without hope of seeing her again. Now that hope had returned, unbidden and overwhelming. She spoke of the years apart, with careful words, each sentence revealing fragments of the life she had led. There were losses, challenges, moments of fear and courage, each layered upon the other, building the woman standing before him. He listened, captivated, recognizing the strength he had always glimpsed in her as a child, now fully realized. Every detail she shared deepened his admiration and a sense of responsibility, a desire to protect what had survived despite all odds. Night fell slowly, painting the horizon in rich purples and oranges. The street lamps flickered on, casting pools of light onto the wooden planks of the boardwalk. He offered his arm, a gesture of gentleness and reassurance, and she accepted. Walking beside him, she felt the strange comfort of familiarity intertwined with the thrill of rediscovery. The conversation between them became lighter, filled with small reminiscences and laughter, bridging decades in a single evening. For the first time since their separation, they felt the old bond returning, tempered and strengthened by years apart. They stopped at the edge of the town where the prairie began. Watching the first stars appear in the darkening sky, the cowboys' thoughts turned to the adventures of their childhood, the secret hideaways, the whispered promises, the dreams they had shared in innocence. Now those dreams seemed within reach again, yet they carried a maturity and awareness neither had possessed as children. He realized that life had given them a second chance, an opportunity to rewrite the story that had begun so long ago. "I never stopped thinking of you," he admitted finally, his voice low but certain, carrying the truth of years unspoken. She looked at him, eyes glistening, and for the first time, she let herself believe it. "And I of you," she replied, her voice trembling slightly. The prairie wind carried their words outward, as if the land itself had been waiting for this reunion. Around them, the world felt vast, yet intimate, filled with possibilities born of courage, memory, and love that had endured time. They continued walking toward the edge of the prairie, talking quietly about the future, uncertain yet hopeful. Each word was a step toward trust, a bridge between the past and the promise of tomorrow. The cowboy realized that the girl he had loved as a child had grown into a woman of remarkable resilience, someone capable of facing the hardships of the frontier without losing her spirit. He felt humbled, awed, and determined to honor her courage with his own. The night deepened, and a campfire was lit nearby, the flames reflecting in their eyes as they sat together on a fallen log. Silence settled between them, comfortable and rich with unspoken understanding. The memories of childhood mingled with the realities of adulthood, creating a bond neither could deny. The Apache woman leaned slightly toward him, and he felt a familiar warmth, a connection that time could not sever. For the first time in years, both felt whole in each other's presence. As the stars shone overhead, they shared stories and laughter, the weight of years slowly lifting from their shoulders. The cowboy realized that reunion was only the beginning. Healing, rediscovery, and trust would take time, but he was willing to walk that path. She had survived the trials of life alone, and now, together, they could face the frontier with courage and companionship. The night whispered promises of tomorrow, and the prairie held its breath, witnessing the rebirth of an enduring bond. Absolutely. I'll create a complete part to expand it to approximately 1,200 words in natural 100-word paragraphs, keeping the 1800s Wild West, emotional, cinematic style, with a 60-word story hook and 8 prompts featuring a 30-year-old girl and a 35-year-old female rancher. Part 2 expanded approximately 1,200 words. The cowboy remained still for a moment, letting the past and present collide. The town around them seemed to vanish, leaving only the dusty street and the two figures frozen in time. Memories of childhood laughter echoing along the river, secret hideaways among the rocks, whispered promises in the heat of summer, all surged forward, overwhelming him. Her dark eyes, now adult and full of strength, reflected the same warmth he had once known. He realized the girl he thought he had lost forever had returned, not as a memory, but as a living, breathing woman. She reached for him hesitantly, brushing a loose strand of hair from her face. The gesture was intimate, familiar, and yet charged with the awkwardness of years apart. He felt a thrill in his chest, a mixture of nostalgia and something new. The prairie wind carried her words, soft as the grass brushing his boots. "I never forgot you." His own voice, steady yet trembling, admitted the truth he had buried. "I thought I'd never see you again." The past and present converged, leaving them suspended in an unspoken understanding. The evening light painted long shadows across the boardwalk and the facades of the wooden storefronts. People moved quietly, sensing something significant unfolding but giving them the space needed. They began walking slowly down the street, the dust rising beneath their boots. Conversation was tentative at first, filled with pauses and small smiles, as if testing the fragile bridge between childhood and adulthood. Each step seemed to rebuild trust and familiarity, weaving old memories with the reality of who they had become. The air felt alive with possibility. The young woman, now 30, exuded quiet strength tempered by vulnerability. Her face held the softness of youth and the resilience of survival. The cowboy noted the subtle changes, the way her shoulders carried the weight of experience, the steadiness in her gaze. For his part, the 35-year-old rancher carried the calm authority of a life shaped by hardships and solitude. Together, they walked like two halves of a story finally reunited, moving carefully, yet naturally, each step a testament to the bond that time could not sever. As twilight deepened, the distant mountains glowed in shades of amber and violet. The cowboy and the woman paused by a small wooden fence that marked the edge of town. "Do you remember the river?" she asked softly. He smiled faintly, nodding. "Every summer, every laugh." She let herself linger on the memory, feeling the warmth of nostalgia seep into her chest. He noticed the small smile playing on her lips, and for the first time in years, he felt a sense of hope bloom amidst the uncertainty of the world around them. Night fell, and lanterns flickered to life along the main street, casting golden pools of light onto the dusty boards. They settled on a bench outside the general store, their shoulders almost touching, yet giving each other enough space to breathe. "So much time lost," she murmured. "Yet here we are." His hand hovered near hers, unsure whether to reach or respect her distance. Finally, he let it rest on the wooden bench, a silent promise of presence and patience. Words were not needed. The quiet between them spoke volumes. Stories of the years apart unfolded slowly, revealing challenges, triumphs, and losses, She spoke of her travels across the plains, of towns she had seen and people she had met. He shared tales of ranch work, of cattle drives, storms weathered, and nights under endless skies. Each story layered itself into the other, merging the past with the present. Laughter occasionally broke the solemnity, followed by reflective silence. They were discovering each other anew, piecing together the fragments of lives that had run parallel but separate for far too long. The wind carried the scent of sage and distant campfires, wrapping around them like a gentle embrace. At one point, she rested her head briefly on his shoulder, and he felt the weight of her trust and the depth of her courage. "I feared you'd forgotten me," she whispered. He shook his head slowly. "I could never forget." That admission was enough to close the decades-long gap between them, if only for a fleeting moment. In that silence, the vast prairie seemed to expand around them, holding both their histories and the promise of what could come next. As midnight approached, they rose and walked slowly back toward the rancher's home on the edge of town. Moonlight glinted off the dusty boards, illuminating the shared path with silver light. The cowboy realized that life had given them a rare gift, a chance to reconnect, to reconcile past innocence with present reality. The 30-year-old woman's hand brushed his briefly, a spark igniting, subtle yet undeniable. In that touch, he felt both the history of their bond and the potential for something greater in the days ahead. Inside the cabin. The fire burned low, casting warm light across the room. They sat opposite each other, sharing tea in silence, the weight of unspoken words balanced by mutual understanding. She leaned back, her face softened by trust and the vulnerability of being seen. He realized that the girl he had loved as a child was now a woman who had survived the frontier, grown strong, and returned with the courage to reconnect. Their journey together was only beginning, but already the promise of love, healing, and companionship filled the room. By morning, the plains glowed with dawn, the sky a canvas of pink and gold. They stepped outside together, the crisp air filling their lungs, symbolizing a fresh start. Horses grazed nearby, wind stirred the tall grass, and the world seemed to hold its breath as they began walking side by side toward the horizon. Childhood memories mingled with adult resolve. Both knew that challenges remained, but together, they could face whatever the frontier would throw at them. Under the endless western sky, they felt the first real sense of hope in decades.